Big tech is consolidating again, and this is a disaster in the making. I'm Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic, and let's dive in. Now, aside from the circular economy and AI that is actually propping up the entire economy, and you know the one I'm talking about, think, NVIDIA slash AMD slash Oracle slash CoreWeave slash OpenAI's circular economy that they've made. Aside from that, we're now seeing a consolidation thanks to the explosion in data centers and the ever-growing demand for processors and memory, as well as in a couple of other things as well. It was just announced that Google is investing $40 billion into Anthropic to give them both cash and compute. And on the exact same day that was announced, which is actually today as I'm recording this, basically Meta just signed a deal with Amazon to use millions of homegrown AWS Graviton chips essentially to power Meta's AI needs. On top of this, we have Project Glasswing. It's basically a situation where only a handful of companies get access to this very super advanced AI by Anthropic. And I did a recent video on that a week or two ago, very excited about the ability of this to basically find and remediate vulnerabilities. And quite frankly, I think that's awesome. But there's only a very select few that are going to get this at this time, even though we now are seeing people apparently getting illegal access to this thing. So we've got to talk about this because there are some longitudinal negative effects of all of this consolidation and circular investment that we just can't ignore. This isn't just growth. This is essentially a structural reshaping of the AI economy, which means it's a structural reshaping of the economy. Now, the interplay here between the hyperscalers of the world and the model developers, so think as an example like Google to Anthropic or Amazon to Meta or Microsoft to OpenAI, that is creating a closed loop where their capital funds, their capital funds the compute needed, the compute then trains the models, and then the models drive demand for more compute. Rinse and repeat. But think about what this does. This actually kills competition. This situation creates barriers to entry that are structural. It's not just a high bar to jump. It's a structurally closed systems. Startups then aren't competing just on their own innovation. They're competing against massive supply chains that have a complete ecosystem that are feeding the planet. So over time, this starts to resemble, and the best thing I could think of was like the old Ma Bell telecom situation in the United States. That was like monopolization, right? That's what this is, more than like a traditional software market like we've seen. Microsoft puts out a product, you can put out competing products, and they're all going to run on operating systems. Now we've got a closed loop that isolates one from the other. But the thing, though, too, as I've been doing homework on this for a bit, is that this is basically distorting the markets as well. So think about it. The cloud providers are investing in AI labs. The AI labs basically are consuming massive amounts of cloud credits. Therefore, the revenues appear inflated because they're partially recycled within that ecosystem. That's what the economists are saying. That's not my opinion. Like I said, I did my homework on this. But the other big thing here that we've got aside from that is that this also locks in supply chains, right? Because trillion-dollar companies are becoming dependent on their specific ecosystems for things like silicon, right? So vertical integration then becomes kind of like a moat around their castle, right? So organizations, even the big ones, then start to lose portability. And if they lose portability, meaning, well, I can take my intellectual property, I can take my structure, and I can move it somewhere else. If you can't do that, if you're building a moat around this, then they therefore lose negotiating leverage because they can't go anywhere else. And on top of this, programs like Project Glasswing are illustrating, I think, a very critical shift that we are seeing in technology, right? Because bleeding edge capabilities are then not broadly accessible. And so access then is very deeply gated by the capital that essentially you're willing to invest, by the partnerships that a company like Anthropic will have, or even the strategic alignment towards their model. In other words, I might want to change my big company to align with them if I want access, or pay them a ton of money. That's a problem, especially for the little guy. And finally, and I think possibly this might be the most important aspect of this, just given my day job, is that this is a massive, massive, massive risk amplification. And it's systemic. I mean, think about this, because when infrastructure and models and capital are tightly grouped together and coupled together and they're circular, then a failure in any one of these aspects, so let's say we've got a chip shortage, the Chinese might want to block Taiwan, which would screw everybody, or we have a cloud outage due to a cyber attack or whatever it is, or maybe there's a massive regulatory change that shocks the entire system. This is going to cascade across the entire ecosystem, and therefore it's going to cascade across the entire economy. Cyber risk, therefore, becomes systemic. And think about it. A compromise in a major provider then has an industry-wide blast radius. That is insane. This is where we're heading. And I don't think this is good. And we're not building platforms that allow for open competition. What we are doing is we are building these circular moded gated ecosystems where you're going to have to pick one battle over the other. And if any one of these in that circle fails, it can cascade across all of them. This is a big problem. And so we have to do something about this. I don't necessarily know what. I'd say, write your member of Congress, but they're not doing anything. So we'll see what happens, but as we march towards this, there's no wonder that the majority of Gen Z really don't want to live in this era per studies. And quite frankly, I might be with them on that. And please share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at Nick AESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well, for as long as you can, in whatever circular ecosystem you're in eventually. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, I don't say private, secure, and informed. Take care.